starboard. And if we'd realised the significance of Derrick's sighting being that submarine at that time, which I've no doubt it was, the conning tower of that submarine following us on the surface. And because the zigzag was every ship followed a zigzag when it's sailing independently, and the turns on that were quite marked. I mean, they were about 35 degree turns, some of them, alterations of course, so that one moment he might be astern of you, the next time he might be on your quarter or one or other quarter. And but when we made that 90 degree port, we must have gone, starboard turn rather, we must have gone right into his hands. And I think at that stage he probably submerged and fired. Well, he did submerge in the log. He submerged and fired two torpedoes, one of which hit us just forward of the bridge, and one in number 4 hold after the bridge superstructure. And I think the sinking time of that ship was various between 6 and 8 minutes, I think, but it was bloody quick. Yes, that's. I think that log was very revealing in that it showed that the skill with which ships were actually hunted by U-boats, and I have great admiration for the German crews, and especially I have read various books. That submarine was sunk in May 1943 off Cuba with all hands. They were in little better conditions, or probably worse conditions than we ourselves. And I mean, the losses in the German submarine service were practically equal, 33,000 men on both services. And it was very evenly balanced, the losses. They were fighting just a grimmer battle as we were ourselves. Grimmer, perhaps, because it was their everyday life to make war. It was not ours. We were trying to follow our peacetime occupation.
It's extraordinary that event on that morning brought you here together 50 years ago. Would you have ever thought it, Peter?
Well, it's quite incredible, because I think, like a lot of youngsters at that time, after the war, one started a new life. I was only 23 after the war, so you started a completely new life, and were quite able to put this sort of thing out of your mind, as the other two have said to me. And you're able to put it out of your mind for a long, long time. But when eventually it does come back, as it does when you're older, and in view of the recent events of 50 years after the war, then it comes back with tremendous strength. And in the meantime, of course, Angus had found me several years ago when we came to see him. This was a very emotional reunion at that time, because I had never heard or thought of anybody in the lifeboat ever after the war. But then the whole thing now changes, and finally we finish up with all this as well, which is quite fantastic.
I think you were always embarrassed to talk about it when you were younger,
Nobody wanted to hear it.
No. But
You wouldn't tell your
grown.
children, they said, oh my God, he's talking about the war again, So you didn't talk about it at all to family and children.
Yeah.
Now all my children have a copy of all my events in the war, and they're interested now after this time.
Good.
There were a whole series of coincidences which led to the way that John and I found Angus again, and it started in South Africa when one of the cadets who'd been on the ship, and who incidentally had been my best man in Durban during the war, still, it was just after the war, immediately after the war, he was talking to some people in a restaurant in Durban, and during the conversation it was mentioned that he'd been at sea and been in the Union Castle, and the lady that they were talking to said, "Do you know anyone called Cutcliffe?" He said, "Yes, I sailed with him. I was his best man." And from that he got our address, and I had a letter from him to say he was coming over, and it would be nice if we could all get together. And I managed to find John's new address and number through the telephone, British Telecom. And then I thought to myself, I wonder if Angus is still alive. And I explained the situation to the telephone inquiries girl, and said I was looking for a man called Murray, Angus Murray, who, if he was alive, would be a very old man, but would be living almost certainly in Stornoway. And she gave me a list of, I think it was 4 A. Murrays on the island, and I phoned up the first one and explained to him what I was trying to do. He said, I'm not the Angus Murray you want, but I know the one you want. And he said, give me your number. And about 15 minutes later, Derek Murray, that's Angus's nephew, phoned up and said, I believe you're trying to get in touch with my uncle. And from then on, it all went, I then spoke to Rhoda and then later to Angus himself. And then we set up the meeting at John's place in Newbury, which unfortunately Peter wasn't able to attend. You've got some business in Germany, I think you told me at the time. Family. But it was a, by that time, Chisholm had come over from South Africa, and we were joined by another ex-cadet colleague of ours, but who wasn't in the ship with Torpedo, but he sailed with Peter and I in the next trip, Neil Frank, and Neil Langton, and we had a wonderful get together down at John's, and Angus, in spite of the heat, it was during that terribly hot summer, Angus was full of beans, and it was absolutely marvellous to see him. Really was. Tremendous bean.
Great.
Yeah. But a coincidence all the way through.
It's remarkable. Tony, have you anything you want?
Anything you want.
So if everybody listens to Angus, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
It's lovely to have them all here, isn't it?
Yes, indeed. Lovely to have them all here and to meet one another, go over the experience as well as Well, in the first place, it's very nice to meet them. Maybe you don't have to, even if you don't say anything, but it's better to be saying something, helping. Of course,
But you never.
Lovely, that's good.
That we called a snowflake was detailed off to take some shots of us coming alongside, and a copy of these photographs was sent. I know my parents had a copy, and I think there were several others sent around.
Yeah, well, they came from Leeds. This man came from Leeds, and they dropped them in at my father's office.
Did they?
Yes.
Well, I managed to dig these out and took them along to the local photographers, and they blew them up. And in this size, you can easily, or I can easily pick up
marvellous.
most of the chaps in the boat with absolute certainty which ones they were. And the only argument that we have amongst it is between John and I about one particular fella. That was John. But it shows quite clearly the blankets that Angus sewed together to make the sail, and the couple of bits of wood that we lapped together, to which the sail was attached, and the oar which acted as a mast. And when you think that we sailed for that long distance, 450, 500 miles, whatever it was, with gear like that, it was a great credit to him as a sailmaker, if nothing else, that we did it, because we moved along quite well. And for a couple of nights early on, we didn't sail at all, we just hove to.
That's right.
And during the storm we had to heave to. So if you take that time out of the sailing time, we may not too bad a speed at all for a heavy, unwieldy boat like that.
Can I ask you, Peter, what was the sewing of the blanket, the sewing like? Because to this day, you know, he still sews. I remember
I
as a
don't
little
think
girl.
he was worrying about the look of the stitches as the effectiveness of the stitches. And that's a testament to how well he did it.
Yeah.
that those two blankets stood up to that gale and to, what was it, 8 days usage
Yeah.
under very, very harsh conditions. So he didn't do too bad a job, did the old man. Marvellous. Yeah,
He used,
And
what was it, did he
use some
unravel
twine.
twine?
used some twine, didn't you, to sew it.
Oh yes, yes, it's
The blankets were stowed up right up in the forepeak of the boat. In fact, one of the few things that hadn't been lost. And when it was decided to try and make these, he got cracking on it right away, and in no time flat we had this lot sorted out. But the Angus shows up very clearly in these photographs. He's sitting on the starboard quarter.
Yeah.
At the tiller was an AB called Jones, and that was an engineer called Souter. There's Peter, sitting on the starboard side of the boat, and just ahead of him was the boatswain, Piercy, who came from Southampton, and I'm sitting just in front of Angus, and in front of me was the carpenter, Oliver, who came from the Channel Islands. And that was the gun layer, Paddy. And here was Piers Jones, one of the cadets. And that was Walter Gibb from Glasgow. And that was the third officer, who was been on watch with John, and who very quickly got named Torpedo Allen because he bought it once already and bought it again right afterwards. And I can't remember that chap, but I'm sure that is John. He says it isn't. But if that wasn't John, I don't know where John was.
I do.
Yeah, not that one. No, because this fella's sitting there, he's got a life jacket on, and I distinctly remember seeing John having taken off his jacket. He had a blue jacket on for most of the time, but he took off his uniform jacket and he was sitting there in that white vest. And I've always, right from the first day that I had this thing, I knew that I was sure in my mind that was John.
Right. Could we stop?
Right, I'm rolling. Whoops, that's me. Right, I'm rolling.
Okay, there you go.
These are blown up versions of a photograph that was made by one of the crew members of the corvette, the Snowflake, which picked us up. And I managed to get them blown up by our local photographers. And it made it very easy then to pick out the details, or some of the details of the boat, and the chaps themselves. First of all, that's the sail, which was made by Angus from two blankets which he found stowed up in the forepeak of the boat, and using twine he sewed these two together, and we picked up some bits of wood that had been floating about, and from that he made a spar, and we lashed it to an oar, and that with that jury rig sail we sailed in 8 days something like 450-500 miles. Now in the boat you can see Angus sitting there. That's an AB called Jones, who came from Liverpool, who was at the tiller. That's an engineer, Souter. There's Peter Franklin there. That's the boatswain, Piercy, from Southampton. That's Oliver, the chippy, who came from the Channel Islands. That was me sitting in front of Angus. That was the gun layer, who was an Irish lad from Belfast. That's Piers Jones, Poker Jones, who was one of the cadets. That's Wally Gibb, the chief officer, who came from Glasgow. And that's Alan, the third officer, who, because of a previous history and his subsequent liking for getting torpedoed, quickly got dubbed Torpedo Alan. And looking at it from the other angle as we came alongside, this was taken as we were brought right alongside, and they had a netting out for us to scramble up. There's Angus, Jones,
Right. Rolling now, Liz.
This second photograph was taken as we were brought in alongside. They'd thrown us a line and they pulled us in. They'd managed to get a scrambling net over the side here. And working from aft forward again, that's Jones, who was the AB from Liverpool. Here's Angus, Souter, who was one of the engineers. Here's Peter. That's me, standing there. That was Chippy. That's the bosun. That's the gun layer, Paddy. There's Piers Jones. And that's Wally Gibb, Chief Officer. And that would have been Torpedo Allen. And sitting right just forward of Piers Jones was a chap in a white vest. No, it was that was the only difficulty we had, whether in fact that was John or not. I think it was John, which would have shown in that one as well. But you can see the sail there. And I believe after they got us all on board, I believe they sank the boat to make sure that it didn't become a hazard to other craft about and cause problems.
Derek, could you put your hand back with your other hand? I think you did
Right.
do it. So if you just hold it like so, and then just in your own time, just point briefly to Angus.
Right, now there's Angus there.
And then take your finger away. And do it again, and don't hold your finger there as long, please.
And there's Angus.
Lovely.
Okay, could you?
We'll get you home, give you a wee drab. That'll warm you up. This is where I like Western Home with all these stones. Oh, thanks.
Well, I know what you're doing, John, but just
I
pretend.
look at Les, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
I should look
Yeah.
at you.
No,
you should
no,
look, you should look at me.
Look at Les.
Look at me, yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. It's
And,
so you're not actually looking straight into the camera. That's
Mhm.
fine.
and serious face, gentlemen, please,
Yeah.
as though
Absolutely.
so Derek's chatting.
I mean, just think about the weather, and that may everyone feel sort of doubly serious and glum and miserable.
Think of the cricket score.
We're
I didn't
winning.
know what it is, but it's bound to be awful.
I folded his face too now. Makes me want to laugh.
Yeah,
Just for a wee while, please.
Especially if you weren't in the boat. I mean,
yeah. Wearing his blue shirt.
and white singlet.
Yes, white singlet.
Just carry on as you are, gentlemen.
No.
Keep looking to Angus as though he's chatting away as before.
Sure can rot again to keep them in rest. Each rot again guy.
Well, how do you-
Tell them when they used to go fishing out on the shore when you
Oh,
got away a
yes.
wee while ago.
Oh, yeah.
You had your own little boat.
Oh,
didn't you?
that's right. And
Nothing of any value. Any lobster.
yes, lobsters as well.
But you never sold them. You just
No, I
ate them
didn't.
yourself. Sheer luxury. Eating them all
yes,
yourself.
give them away. To
Giving
Right,
them
we keep
away.
looking.
Aye, and they were very plentiful too.
Mhm.
Right?
Are they still as plentiful?
Well, I would say they
No.
are.
No. Is that why you would have to have the little boats for going in and out of the
Yes,
crevices?
that's right.
Yes, because the bigger boats can't.
Watching me straight then, Peter, and everything that you
You'll just listen, Peter.
are thinking about is absolutely serious and straightforward, because we've got to keep absolutely straight face at this stage of the proceedings. Is that right, Rhoda? Yes. And Leslie's got a very straight face. But, I'm not sure that I can hold this
Thinking on
situation
my
much
windscreen,
longer.
isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that very strong
What would you like to talk about?
Anything. You just say anything.
It's very difficult, isn't it? Mary had a little lamb.
Well, is it something we have to be serious about? Or
Yes.
Well, as long as it's not funny.
No.
Oh.
Try. Tell me what you did just since I last saw you 3 years ago.
We what?
Tell me what you did. Are you still busy sewing?
Oh, yes, well, factory talk, very boring, but I will talk about the factory.
Because I do a lot of sewing. I quite enjoy it.
Since
So if
we
you just
last
listen,
saw
Odia.
you, yes, since we last saw you, we bought our own factory, which we didn't have before. So we now have a factory with 35 girls in it, which is, super to have, but a great worry as well. And that's all new in the last 12 months.
Sorry to interrupt, Peter. Just after listen to Peter for a few seconds and then look over to Derek, if you would. Just after a wee while.
Yeah.
Sorry, Peter.
Right.
All right, yes.
Now the factory that he had, that he's just bought from, which is a millstone round his neck, if only he could do something about it, he'd be a lot happier. So perhaps the best thing he could...
In spite of Derek's efforts to see that I woke up earlier and just kept sleeping and sleeping. And I think I actually turned up for breakfast at 10 o'clock this morning, which was not a bad feat, really. And
And just
Yes,
just
I
a
know,
few.
it's,
I know it's difficult, Rory. Just a few seconds of a straight face, please.
but it takes a lot of thinking about to do that, to achieve getting up and arriving at breakfast at 10 o'clock in the morning. It's quite a hard thing.
Okay, so we're rolling
Got
now.
no dates.
We're
It's got
rolling
no
now.
worry. Right. Just listen to John. What he has to
You've got
say.
to stop laughing, Angus.
Yes,
and
no
think,
laughing because she has to laugh. Just listen to John.
Yes.
And look at him.
Look at John.
Can you hear what I'm saying? Because did you sleep well last night? And I wondered if you felt that my sleeping till 10 o'clock this morning was an absolute disgrace, because it really was a long time to go. And I think it was partly the fact that we were up late talking the night before for a long time. And during that time we discussed many subjects, wide and far-reaching subjects, both serious and humorous. And that's the way it goes, that after these sort of nights you do tend to sleep in.
Right. This morning we went across to see Derek's factory making the tweed, Harris tweed, and it really was very interesting to see the tweed going from just plain wool through the first section where it was being coloured and then carding it, but the bit that we found most interesting of all was where they were warping the wool. And when we thought of all the amount of wool that was being put through that factory on expensive machinery, hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of machinery, there was one bit that they couldn't do without two men walking up and down on their 2 feet and using both hands to get the wool sorted out. And it seemed incredible that...
Me,
Yeah.
Derek.
Yes.
Well, I was talking about the factory. You were going to tell me, you completely stopped from doing it now, you were going to tell me about what I was going to do and how I was going to get out of it all. So I think, tell him.
What to do with these factories?
Just a minute. Maybe
Yeah.
Anna will do that.
Well, the best thing you could do with your factory, I think, is to bring it up here to Shawcross and put it on next to Derek's.
Straight face,
And-
gentlemen, please.
And then you can have shirts made from this Harris tweed, which will tickle our fancy, no doubt. And if you can sell them with a big tartan on and a sign made in South Shawcross by the Murray Franklin Corporation, President Peter Hall Franklin, born on the 22nd.
Economic recession.
So hold it, let me just...
Economic recession.
Right, okay, so we're rolling now.
Right, something gloomy.
Tell him the auditors are coming tomorrow.
The auditors are coming tomorrow,
That man.
and the VAT man's coming tomorrow. And when you were young and beautiful, you wouldn't have known what an auditor was. And when you were in Galveston, you wouldn't have cared what an auditor was either. And we had a nice time there in Galveston, in the Gulf of Texas, in 1942. And we sailed from there around to New York, and we sailed